Hi, Mike. Wanted to do a reply to your post on the meaning of life for an atheist, so how about we take a look at some of the points you make?
Think of it this way. Your final destination is nothingness, oblivion. Okay? Let's use an analogy here. You're driving to work. You can go the long route, take the scenic route, enjoy the scenery, or you can take a shortcut and get to work as soon as possible. The same thing with suicide. I mean, why wouldn't you just take the shortcut? Ultimately, you have the same destination.
You really don't see the irony in this, do you? The point you're making here actually counts against your position, not against the atheist position. The theist believes that there is an afterlife. They have a destination to go to. If you really believe that when you die you're going to go to heaven, suicide is the rational thing to do. You should kill yourself right away. This life sucks. No matter how good anything is in this life, the next life's going to be so much better. You're the one who should be killing yourself so you can get to your destination. The atheist, on the other hand, this is the destination. You know, this is what we're here for, our own lives. We're not going someplace. Oblivion isn't a place you can get to. It's nothingness. It's the end of existence. It's no longer being. So we want to take as long as we can on that route, as it were, because the route's what it's all about. Your metaphor cuts in the opposite direction of what you think it does.
And I'd say I found your answer to be logically fallacious and, frankly, pathetic. I call you out on an appeal to emotion, a logical fallacy. I like living. I have this emotion for living. I love it. So that doesn't work.
You don't seem to understand what the appeal to emotion fallacy is. That's only a fallacy when you appeal to emotion in place of an argument. In this instance, the emotion is part of the argument. The question is, how can life be meaningful to an atheist? Well, let's ask a more general question. How can life be meaningful at all to anyone? It's only meaningful if they find meaning in it. And clearly, one of the many ways in which we find meaning is by way of our emotions. We value this life. We care about this life. That's simply what it means to have meaning, to have value. It's not a fallacy to invoke that, any more than it would be a fallacy to say, how do you know that love exists? Well, I feel love. You can't say that because then you're appealing to an emotion. The only evidence you can have that love exists is that you feel love. And likewise, the only evidence you can have that there's meaning in life is if someone takes meaning in it, finds meaning in it. And that's precisely what the emotions do for us, theist and atheist alike. So please, get your logical fallacies straight before you invoke them.
I believe that atheists can have meaning in their life, subjective meaning. Okay, but it's completely arbitrary. Okay, you can have it it becomes just like language, like a sign and a signifier. There's no objective meaning to life as an atheist. As soon as the subject should perish, then the meaning of their life also perishes.
We need objective meaning in our lives. You make it sound like simply because the meaning is subjective, therefore it's not real or it doesn't really count. But that just seems preposterous. Like you say, it's just like language. You know, signs and signifiers are arbitrary, but you know what? They still have meaning. That's all we need. The fact that they're arbitrary doesn't undermine the value of language or the usefulness of language or the beauty and the poetry of language. Same thing with the meaning of life. Yeah, I think that when I die, or perhaps, as you say, maybe when all the people who know me and love me die, my life will no longer have any meaning at that point. But so what? It has meaning now. It has meaning while I'm alive. That's all I care about. It doesn't have to have meaning in some sort of cosmic sense, some sort of eternal, immortal sense to matter now. In fact, it actually works quite the other way around. If there is an eternal afterlife, then my life right now has no meaning. Because after all, what really matters is the afterlife. What matters is that life, not this one. This life is trivial. It's an infinitesimal drop in the ocean. It's really the grand scheme of things that truly matters.
Immanuel Kant's second formulation of categorical imperative. So that's contingent on the first, which is act only on that maxim, which you would like to see applied as universal.
You're just wrong on your Kant scholarship here. Kant didn't derive the second formulation of the categorical imperative from the first one. He derived them independently and said they were equivalent. So just get that fact straight.
Immanuel Kant was a Christian. So can you, as an atheist, take a Christian position and use that to justify the lack of committing suicide? No.
You're right that Kant was a Christian, but his moral philosophy was completely secular in nature. It did not derive in any fashion from his theology. He made it deliberately that way. He wanted to base his moral philosophy on reason and reason alone, not upon his theological beliefs. So to suggest that an atheist can't appeal to Immanuel Kant's philosophy is simply mistaken, and I can point to literally at least a dozen different Kant scholars who are also atheists and Kantians in the moral sense. So you're making a strange ad hominem here when you say that because Kant was a Christian, non-Christians can't appeal to him.
The only real fully consistent moral system is Catholic faith. Completely consistent.
There's nothing logically inconsistent about Kant's moral philosophy. It's just intuitively unappealing, and the same goes for the Catholic moral faith. You can look at their position on abortion, on contraception, on masturbation, on stem cell research. All of these things are just completely morally unappealing to anyone who hasn't drank the Catholic Kool-Aid.
Okay, what about utilitarianism? Greatest good for the greatest amount of people. By killing yourself, you're robbing yourself of future choices. So I guess you're against abortion, because by aborting a baby, you're depriving people of future decisions.
You seem to have no appreciation for the serious population crisis this planet is facing, Mike. We got about 6 billion people on the planet right now, and at a reasonable level of resource allocation across the board, the planet can support maybe 1 billion people. So not only from a utilitarian point of view is abortion perfectly acceptable, there should be a very aggressive form of birth control, because the more people that come into this planet, the greater the likelihood that there will be an environmental catastrophe in the future. So from a utilitarian point of view, to maximize pleasure, we need much, much fewer people. Now, you might be thinking, doesn't that mean we should kill off people from a utilitarian point of view? No, clearly not, because that would be a horrible moral nightmare as well. It would be just as bad as the environmental disaster, killing off a whole bunch of people. That would greatly undermine utility. So from a utilitarian point of view, the most sensible thing to do is embark upon scientific research that can help deal with our environmental problems, drastically cut down on the population in ways that sort of respect people's individual overall utility, and, well, quite frankly, if you pardon the irony, pray to God, because we're in a lot of trouble.
What if the aborted baby eventually discovers the cure for cancer? Then that wouldn't be the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. I guess you're against birth control. I guess you're against masturbation.
By the same token, the aborted baby might become the next Pol Pot. So, given that we can't predict the future, you can't really make reasonable utility predictions about whether or not this baby's going to grow up to be a hero or grow up to be evil. It's kind of a wash on that front. As for birth control, I already addressed that in the last point. And masturbation is 100% positive utility, 0 negative utility. It's one of the easily the most pleasure-maximizing things people can do. From a utilitarian point of view, quite frankly, people should probably masturbate a whole hell of a lot more.
Not to forget that utilitarianism is ultimately a political philosophy.
4 points to reply to that. Yeah, so, and what?
I can't think of any philosophical argument. I've thought of many of them. Even moral hedonism. You can't use moral hedonism against suicide. All the pleasure and pain that you experience in your life eventually has no significance after the grave. Okay, you live your entire life for the pursuit of pleasure. By killing yourself, you're depriving yourself of future pleasure. That future pleasure is ultimately meaningless, because once you're dead, there will be no future pleasure anyway. So by living, you're depriving yourself of future pleasure.
Once again, we seem to be coming back to the same fundamental mistaken presupposition that you have, that something can only matter now if it's going to matter later. But that's ridiculous. If something matters now, then it matters now. Whether or not it matters later is completely irrelevant. All that matters is that it matters now. And it does. If you were a hedonist, and if what you wanted was to maximize your pleasure by living longer, you get more pleasure. Yes, you're right that once you die, you don't get any more pleasure, but that's kind of like saying, I don't want $1 million because I can't have $1 billion. Well, what if I were to give you $1 billion? Well, I don't want $1 billion because I can't have $1 trillion. Well, what if I were to give you $1 trillion? You can't say that because you can never get a complete unlimited amount of money, therefore you shouldn't want any money at all. That is ridiculous and just fundamentally mistaken. If it matters now, it matters now. If the more of what you can get matters now is better, then that's better. It makes no difference that 1 billion years from now, no one's going to remember and it's all going out in the wash. So what? Who cares? That's the 1 billion years from now's issue, whether or not they want to care. Right now in my life, I have pleasure, I have enjoyment, and I am living it up.